This podcast is brought to you by Kyoto Japan Automotive Group, a company which I've known personally for over 20 years, and your one-stop shop for tires, batteries, and auto parts. Visit their website at www.kyotojap.com for more details. In this podcast, my guest is Dr. Conrad Hughes. He's the Director General of the International School of Geneva, which this year celebrates its 100th anniversary, 1924 to 2024. We talk about his personal career journey to one of the top jobs in international education, how the International School of Geneva started and why, what he and his teaching colleagues are teaching their young charges these days, his views on the place of the school, the teacher and the family in the socialization of children and young people today, and the contribution of the International School of Geneva has made to International Geneva over the past 100 years. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello everyone. Many of you listening to me today in Switzerland and even outside will be familiar with the International School of Geneva, or Ecolint, its short form in French. You might even have been a pupil there, or student, as young people in school are now called, or your children or grandchildren attended one of the campuses. Now let me declare an interest right at the beginning. My three did. Today, the McKay interview is devoted to education, and today's focus is not only because the education of the young is, and has always been, so important for societies, wherever they happen to be, but because this year the International School of Geneva celebrates its 100th anniversary, 1924 to 2024, and that's quite an achievement for any institution. Now, joining me today is the Director General of the International School of Geneva, Dr. Conrad Hughes. In fact, I'm his guest at the La Châtaigneraie campus in Founé in the canton of Vaud, next door to Geneva. Many of you listening will know that I've lived in this charming village for many years. Dr. Hughes, Conrad, if I may, welcome to the McKay interview. Congratulations on the school's 100th anniversary.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's good to be back in this place. Again, my wife and I spent some enjoyable moments here, and it always brings back fond memories when I come onto the campus. Conrad, to do justice to a 100-year story in half an hour will require that we go at quite a pace today, though we'll not be able to cover all the topics that I'd like to talk to you about, but I hope we'll cover most of them. Let's begin with you, Conrad. Your CV is interesting, your life story is varied. Please tell me and our listeners how you ended up as DG here from an early life in South Africa.
I was born in South Africa in the early 1970s. Both of my parents were academics. My mother was a very strong feminist and actually an anti-apartheid activist, Dr. Jean Marquardt. I attended an all-boys Catholic school in the heyday of apartheid, and I hated it. There was corporal punishment, and it was built on a morally corrupt social system. And I think as young children, you could sort of feel that in the pedagogy and the values of the school. My life changed when I visited Swaziland, as it was then known, Eswatini, African kingdom nestled between Mozambique and South Africa. My father was an external examiner for the International Baccalaureate at this very special school, Waterford Kamhlaba. Kamhlaba in Siswati means one world, which is a non-racial school and a UWC, United World College. And I actually asked him, I said, Dad, I'd like to go to this school. So he sent me there. And that's where I discovered my passion for knowledge and education. I was treated with humanity. This was a school with a vision. It was a school that was resolutely against apartheid. And I had this incredible French teacher, Mr. Usman, who used to teach us at a ridiculously high level French literature, things like Baudelaire. We could hardly understand it. But there was a sort of cult following around him. And I think unconsciously that's when I realized I would go into education. There was something so passionate about discussing intellectual, social, conceptual issues, and we'd really get drawn into the magic of learning. So what if it changed my life? And from there, I went to study in France, in the UK, and in South Africa. I've got degrees in comparative literature, in linguistics, in education. I actually have 2 doctorates. One is on, it's in English literature, on J.M. Coetzee, who's South Africa's greatest novelist. And the other's an EdD, a doctorate in education, with a focus on how education can reduce prejudice. I taught in schools in India, in the Netherlands, in France, and wound up in Geneva some 20 years ago. And from there, I sort of climbed my way from teacher to coordinator to director of education to head of school. And today I'm the Director General. It's a great privilege and honor to serve. I would just end by saying that, my inspiration comes from my family. My wife, Estelle, is an incredible person. She's a leader of a school herself. She's the head of the secondary school at the International School of Dakar. My son, Melchior, who plays for the Swiss national team, is a high-performing basketball player, and he's finishing high school. My daughter, Eloise, who does track and field, is studying sociology in the United States. And I draw a lot of inspiration from my family. They're my source of energy.
Oh, that's good. As a family of high achievers, and it's fascinating to hear how all these things have come together. And it seems to me, and I've only met you once before, that you're the right man in the right place at the right time. So good on the International School of Geneva to have you as leading them at this time.
Thank you. I believe in service leadership. And distributed leadership. We have to do things together. We have to work in a partnership. That is the paradigm of the 21st century.
So let's talk about the International School. It's 100 years old. That's really quite an achievement, 1924. The obvious question to you is why? And why then? Who saw the need and a market for such a school in 1924? Where did it start? Did it start here in Fune on this campus or in Geneva? Just give me and the listeners a quick sort of whistle-stop tour of its history. And also, roughly, what you've planned for the centenary year, without going into too much detail.
It was upon the ashes of World War I that a small group of visionaries came together to design a school for children of different nationalities, different backgrounds, different languages and cultures. It's the world's first international school. This group of pioneers who worked for the League of Nations, for the International Labour Office, were part of the Rousseau Institute.
Oh, they worked for the League of Nations.
Well,
at the time,
one of our founders, Arthur Switzer, was a functionary working at the League of Nations, and he's an important figure. Another was Ludwig Reichmann, the Polish bacteriologist, who actually went on to set up UNICEF. They're two of them, possibly the most important founders, but they were all swept up in this école nouvelle, as it was called at the time. The thinking of John Dewey, of Montessori, of Freinet, Froebel, this pedagogic revolution that was taking place, where the idea was less on what's being taught and more on how young people are learning. And so this idea of a student-centered school was equally important.
And this was just to interrupt you, this was a consequence to some extent or to a large extent of the terrible carnage of the First World War?
Well, what the experience of World War I did was to mark in the hearts and minds of our founders what you'll find in our mission statement and in our charter, which is a school for peace, a school that believes in the equal value of each human being. Our charismatic second director, Marie-Thérèse Moret, she always said that the crime of crimes here is to make anyone feel bad about where they come from. That's not what we're about. This is a school for friendship. We have 143 nationalities. It's an extraordinary microcosm of the world, and we're committed to living out the values of the school, which are about an education for peace. The school started with a handful of students, and it grew through time to become not only the oldest, but one of the largest international schools in the world today. There's much more to tell, but essentially, Ecolint, it's a beacon of light and hope for education, because it's bringing us back to this idea of educating for peace.
And just as a quick the original campus was in Geneva, not here in Fune.
That's right.
So I never really understood.
Well, they started in an apartment downtown Geneva. The students had to take their shoes off so as not to disturb the neighbors as they walked along the floorboards. They moved in the late 1920s to La Grande-Boissière, which is our oldest campus.
Yes.
It's a beautiful space.
I know the place, yeah.
Yeah. And the first day of school, which was dedicated to building a rabbit hutch, is iconic in our collective memory. The school then expanded in the 1970s, early 1970s. We added La Châtaigneraie. This
in
campus,
the 1970s?
Yeah, this campus goes
okay.
back to the very early 1900s, but it joined Ecolint in 1970.
I see.
And then we added Campus des Nations around 2005.
I remember that being, yes.
So we've got 3 campuses today, 7 schools, over 4,500 students, just under 1,300 employees.
Okay, look, I think I mentioned to you the first time we met that I started my professional life as a school teacher, and though I didn't stay in the profession for long, I've always maintained an interest in the purpose of education and the vitally important job of schools and teachers. So let me ask you a simple question, Conrad, and see how complex or straightforward your answer is. What does learning mean for school age, let's say 7 to 17 or 18 children in 2024, and what are you educating them for? You've touched a little bit on that already, but clearly this is a much deeper subject. And what do you actually teach the children in your care?
That's not a simple question.
No, I know that. But I think I have to ask it anyway.
No, it's a good question. Fundamentally, in 2024, we have a professional and a moral obligation to understand that learning is a social and emotional phenomenon and not a uniquely technical cognitive one. The emotional connection that exists between peers, between the teacher and the students, the way that concepts and ideas are being brought across has to be conjugated. It has to be translated through emotions. And we know more about the brain and learning through neurobiology today than we ever have. So it's really not okay to be in a learning environment where 19th century didactic practices are still being used, everyone's bored, and learning's not happening. A great teacher isn't asking, what are the students learning? What am I teaching? A great teacher is asking the question, what are the students learning? And how are they learning? So the first thing, I think it's about pedagogy. And it's about a connection with the students. You walk around our classrooms, you'll see there's a lot of active learning, there's a lot of group learning, there's a lot of project-based learning, and there's a really good relationship with the student, but between the student and the teacher.
Students and the teacher, you mean?
And the students themselves. But that's a bedrock of learning. It's not incidental. We want students to be happy coming to school because when you're happy, you release your critical and creative potential much more, and you open up, and that's when the gifts start to develop. And if a great teacher will convert those gifts into talents. So that's important. Now that's the how of learning. In terms of what they're learning, there are the basics. If a young child does need to be reinforcing literacy and numeracy, despite this age of technology and easy access to information, if you're not able to bring to your working memory knowledge that you've stored and consolidated in your long-term memory easily, it's going to be difficult to communicate. You need to be able to deploy automaticity to speak well, to interact well, and to use diverse tools and resources.
So you're talking now at more at the primary school level, the children who are 8, 9, 10, before they move into secondary.
Absolutely. And reading is an essential staple of learning. We're a bilingual school.
I was going to ask you that, just so people who don't know the school listening in, this is an English and a French they have 2 different sections, correct?
We're a bilingual foundation, so that the goal is for students to get as close to cognitive academic language proficiency in both languages. At the end of their pathway.
Right.
There's slightly different ways of doing this, but fundamentally our approach is CLIL, which is content and language integrated learning. You're learning...
Say it again,
content and language integrated learning.
Right.
So that if I'm learning, a second language, it's not just about labeling a train station, but I'm actually learning a subject through the language.
Sure.
It's much more immersive. That's part of literacy. And it's also exploring this amazing neurodiversity that exists within students and cognitive flexibility at a young age, and really trying to harness as much of that as you can. While this is happening, and they're learning the basics and the sort of bedrock of understanding, of conceptual understanding, we need to look further than just knowledge itself. And even further than skills, into what we call competences. So competence, it's a unity of knowledge, skill, and attitude.
It's important that you define, because there's a word I hear spoken, I won't say bandied about, but spoken by professionals in the teaching profession, and I'm never really sure what competence means when compared with knowledge and skill. But now you've brought that together in a very useful way.
Let me put it to you this way, Michael. What's the difference between a skilled worker, a knowledgeable worker, and a competent worker? The competent person is not only knowledgeable and skilled, but they know how to show up with other people, to solve problems, to work in a group. They're trustworthy. They can solve problems. They're creative. You see, so it's much more than.
So it's much rounder.
It's much rounder,
yeah.
and that's where attitudes, dispositions come in. Learning to be, not just learning to know, and learning to do. So ultimately, what we're looking at, it's students understanding how they can work towards a more peaceful world, a more inclusive world, and a more sustainable world. These are our curriculum imperatives, that we're constantly coming back to these higher order imperatives that are enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals and in the mission of the school. We want our graduates to leave as ambassadors and people who can contribute to a world where there's more inclusivity, there's more peace, and there's more sustainability. This is part of our mission.
Just a quick interjection there. It just occurred to me to ask you, given that many of the parents of these children are international movers, in a way like I was when I was a younger man, is it disruptive that children maybe only come for 3 or 4 years and leave to the school? Or do you find that children and the parents and the children are staying longer and longer in the school because people are staying here longer and longer?
We have
Is there a churn?
We have a 94% retention rate. So
really?
Overall,
as high as that?
Yeah.
Wow.
The children they stick around.
Yeah.
But as an international school with students coming from all over the world, we've designed a curriculum approach that's compatible with multiple systems.
I see. Okay.
And part of the work is and it's part of our mission, is preparing students to go out into the world and to make it a better place. So I don't think it's disruptive.
It's not disruptive.
No, not at all. As I think parents need to think carefully about the investment they're making in their children's education, and aim for some continuity where you can.
Yeah, of course. Now, just to take it a stage further, maybe a stage wider, what does wider society, especially the institutions of higher learning, the world of work, demand of you and your teaching colleagues as you prepare these young people for the next stage of their lives, namely early adulthood? I mean, is there, Conrad, and I'm not looking to try and find problems where there aren't any, but is there a dissonance between what parents tell you they want, what institutions of higher learning tell you they want, and what employers tell you they want from these young people?
This is a global problem. You look at the end of high school summative assessment. What it's essentially doing is test-taking ability, how well you can do multiple choice tests, short item response work. There might be some critical thinking in there, but a lot of it is regurgitation of declarative knowledge. And in fact, knowing how to respond to questions to get points. What does the world of work need, and what do a lot of higher education institutions look for? Lifelong learning, self-agency, the ability to interact with others with diverse tools and resources, to interact with the world, being able to transfer knowledge across epistemes, so transdisciplinary understanding, and multiliterateness, meaning that you're strong in a number of different areas. There is in fact a mismatch between this 19th century assessment model that all schools are lumbered with effectively at the end of high school, and what we're really trying to prepare students to be. We've designed an alternative transcript, which is called the Ecolint Learner Passport, which is actually mapping how students develop those 7 competences I just mentioned. And it's very much appreciated by those that see the passport and have worked with us on the passport, including universities. We have a group called the Coalition to Honor All Learning, which is a group of about 50 schools around the world. And we're all looking at reforming end-of-school transcripts because we want something that's life-worthy and that is centered on human flourishing and is forward-looking.
So you designed and implemented.
Absolutely.
This, yeah.
Students,
so
they graduate.
There's evidence that it works that has already been put into
let's put it this way. When students graduate, they have their IB diploma or their maturité, they have a high school diploma, but they also get an Ecolint Learner Passport, which is a description of how they've developed these competences in and out of the classroom. We're interested in what students are doing in their sports, their social impact work, creativity, extracurricular activities. It's so important to have a holistic appreciation of what students do, for schools to know that and to celebrate it, and for us to send the message out to young people that these things count, that learning is much more than that narrow, high-stakes assessment moment at the end of high school.
And the feedback you get from, not to labour the point, but I just want to be sure that I understand what you're saying to me. The feedback you get from the universities and maybe from, maybe from employers as well, is that this is a good system, that the young people that come out are useful to them.
It's an interesting discussion. I mean, North American universities, some Spanish universities, for example, are very keen on this competence-based approach. Other universities are maybe sort of still stuck in the treadmill of academic grades and that narrow approach. The problem is there's so much pressure on systems and people that changing the game is very difficult.
The competition as well for
the
places.
Competition.
Yeah.
So, we have to work together. Now, we're a school that gets outstanding results and astonishingly good university placement. We're an inclusive school, so we offer an education to all the students that we can, and we manage to take them to an extremely high level of academic proficiency and performance. But it's not enough. We have to describe more than that. We have to honor all learning.
Okay, I understand.
There's nothing more beautiful than seeing students at the end of high school, in a high school play, at sports day, doing service learning. Maybe involved in some kind of personal project, it might be entrepreneurial, and to see that passion. And schools have to look at that as part of the learning, not as something that's happening outside of school that we don't want to know about.
No, I agree with you, Conrad. It's just I wondered what these other institutions, how they view these young people that come out at 18 or 19. But you've answered my question very well. Look, my guest today is Dr. Conrad Hughes, the Director General of the International School of Geneva, and we're talking about education and the young in this 100th anniversary year of the school. Look, this question is not intended as a criticism, Conrad, but rather an observation. Isn't this an institution merely an island of privilege for the children of the relatively wealthy parents or even grandparents, as well as governments and multinational companies based in the area who pay for the school fees of the children of their fortunate senior expat employees, diplomats, and I was one, just as that happened to me 30 years ago. I mean, how do you see the situation of this relatively privileged institution and the children in the school?
We're a not-for-profit school. We're a foundation, and we're a private school, which means that the fees are what they are. So you're looking at something between 20 and 35K as you move up the years per annum. Now, we're not the most expensive school in Geneva as a private school, and we're certainly way below some of the other schools in Switzerland. But we understand that this can be a stretch. What you're paying for is extraordinary quality. The scaffolding around students, the pastoral care, the guidance counseling, and the results, not to mention the values and the experience, is I think why parents are willing to commit to this. But with the board behind me, we are committed to making the school as affordable as possible, which is why we haven't raised fees for 2 years running, despite inflation. Against an accumulation of 4% inflation, we've kept the fees flat. We've actually reduced the fees for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. We have a series of discounts that are available to parents. And we're committed to digging even deeper to ensure that our school is affordable as possible.
So
it's important. Can I just say one thing? It's really important to know that we run a scholarship program. We have full burses at the school. Many of them are refugees, and we're moving to increase that number. So this is part of Ecolint's mission. It's to ensure that we're even more accessible.
Just a small important point that I must have missed. You take children as young as 3, do you?
That's what we call pre-reception.
I see.
All the way up to 18. Yeah. So it's 15 years of schooling.
I see. Okay.
And when you join the school early on, and you stay at the school, we see that the results are extraordinary because of the cumulative effect of this world-class, unique,
I can imagine.
international
I can
education.
imagine, yeah. Let me just change the emphasis a little bit and talk now about the family, vis-a-vis the family. What, in your opinion, Conrad, and experience, is the place of the school and the teacher in the socialization of children, young people today? I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but let's examine it a little bit more carefully. What I mean by socialization, preparing young people to live and contribute fully to the society that they'll enter as young adults. Tell me a bit more about socialization.
Okay, this is a great question. I think it's in two parts. You get on public transport, everyone's stuck to their phones.
Yes.
We're conversing through social media. Lev Vygotsky, this visionary Russian psychologist, way back in the 1930s, he invented this concept of social constructivism. What does it mean? It means from a young age, learning is about discourse with other people. It's about live interactions. It's about discussions. Because what you're doing is you're externalizing your inner thoughts, you're testing your ideas, you're listening, and you're learning the rules of the game to live together. You're formulating logical thought. So, COVID has shown us when you disrupt the social environment of learning, you're already taking out of the whole experience something that is essential, which is human contact. So it's important that schools remain places where that live social interaction is rich. Now, part of it is having critical discussions about world events. We don't shy from those. We want to educate our students about what's happening in the world so that they're informed decision makers. So in terms of socialization, our graduates will leave being able to converse with people of all sorts of different backgrounds. They're interculturally competent, to be confident, to have a sense of criticality, to have a voice, and to be informed, and not just to be, social media fodder, and to be sort of aimlessly drifting from one screen to the other. Schools have to fight against this, and they, to be honest, schools and universities are some of the last bastions of humanity in a world that's where technology, which is a great thing, and we're going to talk about technology in a second, in so many ways, it is invading that social space, and it's so important for young people to enjoy learning to grow together in this social network of human sharing.
But let me just test you a little bit more on that. I mean, you're grounded in a community in one particular part of Geneva, Cherbourg or Grand Canal, here in Fune. But in terms of the social construct within that community, you're not a community school like the local schools are, where they draw the children from the local community. I mean, I know this because I was a parent myself here. Most children come by bicycle or by their parents' car and drop them at the gate. Just tell me a little bit more about how you, not you personally, but your young people and the staff as well, interact with the community in which the building is grounded. I'm interested to know how you see that.
Students are engaged in service learning, and the way that we describe service learning is learning to serve and serving to learn.
Right.
There are a lot of local projects, cleaning up the Lac Léman, working with the soup kitchen at Montbriand.
So they get involved in that, do they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got a project in one of our campuses
I didn't know.
where the students go to an old age home just to bring a little bit of laughter and happiness to the residents there. So there is that connection. And, strategically, we're looking at strengthening our relationship with the canton, the Republic, and the town of Geneva. For example, we've got on just next week, on Monday, a basketball competition between our Ecolint All-Stars, this is a foundation team, and two cantonal teams, Collonges-Bellerive and Verrier. We're also working with the Office Cantonal de la Population de Migration on a global citizenship course that we'll be rolling out next year, which involves learning the history, geography, and political systems of Switzerland. So this is something that all international schools face. How can we be glocal? Not just global, but glocal, meaning connected to the local community. So it's an ongoing opportunity, and we're reinforcing it.
No, I'm glad you expanded on that. Let's talk about technology. We touched on that, but only briefly. As other professional services and industries are obliged to adapt to changing innovative technology, what should and will the teaching profession do. You can guess that I have in mind the topical debate about artificial intelligence and its contribution to learning and knowledge gathering in the broadest sense. Well, how do you see that as a professional and your colleagues on the staff here?
We have an official partnership with UNESCO's International Bureau of Education. They have actually helped us with our curriculum design. And we've worked with them on our generative artificial intelligence policy. If you look at the launch of the Global Education Monitoring Report this year, it was all about technology on our terms. So it's using technology in creative, critical, and ethical ways. Our tagline in our policy, which we've trained teachers in, is technology is where our thinking starts, it's not where our thinking ends. If you attend our webinars, because we do these public webinars on using technology for learning, and this is run by our specialists in the school, you'll see our philosophy, which is to embrace technology and to use it, not to shy away from it. Now, concretely, what does that mean? Well, for example, if generative artificial intelligence can produce a type of knowledge, then let it do this, and students get around in circles and they discuss what's being produced and they critique it. Let generative artificial intelligence do some brainstorming for you, but then look at the brainstorming that has come out of it and discuss it and critique it and improve it. Use generative artificial intelligence the way it's being used in the workplace, but then go further with your uniquely human faculties of creativity, of critical thinking, and always a discussion around it and a deeper understanding of how these algorithms work, the way that they scrape information off the web to come up with these statistically significant phrases or images, and what that means in terms of the production of knowledge. But use it. Don't be afraid of it.
And this is in train at present, or this is a process that you're thinking about and planning to implement at some point?
Oh, no.
Where are you in the continuum on this?
We've rolled out our generative artificial intelligence policy.
You've done that?
We ran a STEAM summit earlier in the year.
A STEAM summit?
Yeah, so that's science, technology,
you're talking acronyms too.
Using the principles of engineering and art to sort of bring all of this together in project-based
So say again, STEAM stands for?
Well, it's STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
I see.
Although I like to nuance it. It's science and technology, using science and technology and mathematics using the principles of engineering. You add the A, which is art. So the idea being that creativity, design thinking, all of this needs to be integrated in the way that we're producing a lot of knowledge in the 21st century. So this is not something that schools can shy away from. I'll just give you a quick example. This is less about generative artificial intelligence, but more about access to the web. A friend of mine was talking about a conference he was at where a minister of education was talking angrily about a student who contradicted their teacher, who'd said something in the classroom by looking it up on Google and saying, this is not what it says here. And the teacher confiscated the phone.
Oh dear.
And you think, is that really what you want to be doing?
Yeah.
I mean, the teacher doesn't know everything. Knowledge is available. Let the students access it, but then let's discuss it.
Yeah. No,
Don't forget what I said earlier. There are still things that you need to know off by heart for the sake of automaticity.
No, I took that on board. Yeah. Last question. I mean, we could talk much longer, Conrad, but last question. What of 100 years? I have to ask you this question. What of 100 years, 1924 to 2024, of practical experience in the community of International Geneva taught Ecolint? Give me some examples of what is referred to now as International Geneva, its reputation, how Ecolint has contributed to what is talked about as International Geneva.
In 1953, we invented the Model United Nations system for students, which we practice in the Palais des Nations every year.
That dates back to 53, because my children took part in that.
Well, we're the first school to have ever done that. And we're very proud. That's a contribution to an extraordinary learning experience. And it's right here in the heart of Geneva that it started. In 1968, we were one of the schools that invented the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. The very first IB diplomas ever were presented to our students in 1971. That's putting Geneva on the map as a place that's at the heart of the genesis of international education. We have a long-standing relationship with the United Nations and their affiliated groups. 40% of our families come from UN-affiliated organizations.
40%, you said?
Yeah, Kofi Annan was on our board of directors at one point. It's a school with a deep history in Genève International and a commitment to serve not only the international community but the local community. And the centenary is going to bring that out even more. which really starts next year. Our centenary, our anniversary date is the 17th of September. We launch it this year at our World Alumni Reunion, which is from the 13th to the 16th of June. But next year, you're going to see wonderful celebrations of 100 years of international education in Geneva. And I very much look forward to interacting with you and with all of our partners on that wonderful project.
Thank you, Conrad. It's been fascinating listening, talking to you. I hope the centennial celebrations go off well. I'm sure they will. Thanks for making time for me. I know you're very busy here. My guest today has been Dr. Conrad Hughes, Director General of the International School of Geneva, this year 100 years old. Thank you, Conrad.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mackay Interview podcast, brought to you by Kyoto Japan Automotive Group, a company which I've known personally for over 20 years, and your one-stop shop for tyres, batteries and auto parts. Visit their website at www.kyotojap.com for more details. And you can find more podcasts on Anchor FM. Just Google Mackay Interview Anchor FM. Thanks again for listening.